What's going on, everybody? This is the Figuring Out Finance podcast, episode number 15, back again with another book breakdown. And this one's going to be a really fun and probably a little bit of a shorter episode for you guys today. It is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So this isn't a super well-known, you're just going to pick it up off the shelf and read it. This is something that I heard a lot about through some of the real estate investors and some of the other people who are almost a little spiritual. And it's just a really, really interesting book because the overall takeaway from this book is the message and not exactly the story. So as you start to read some of the personal or the self-help books, they come off as stories and they're told as stories, but you're able to see the entire message. So the 5 a.m. Club is a lot like that as well. And I've read a couple more books, not off the top of my head here, but they're told in stories, so you're able to take away the entire message. But The Alchemist, this one was one of the first ones that I kind of read like this, and I was a little bit unsure about it. So I'm going to break down a little bit what an alchemist is, and we're going to get into a shortened, brief overview of the story, and then I'm going to break down the overall message of the book and what I thought it was to me in my personal situation. So breaking down or getting into it here is, what is an alchemist? So off of Google, an alchemist is a person who transforms or creates something through a seemingly magical process. So keep that in mind as I'm going through the breakdown here. So, getting into the story, The Alchemist is a short story about a young boy who goes to follow his heart after he keeps having these dreams of riches sleeping under a sycamore tree in Spain. So he's told by a gypsy and the king of Salem after he tells him his dreams, and they tell him to go follow his dreams to Egypt, where he sees the treasure at the foot of the Egyptian pyramids. So on his journey, he's robbed of his flock of sheep and works with a crystal merchant for a year and then becomes wealthy. And instead of continuing to work, he sells his riches to continue his journey and joins a caravan with an Englishman studying to become an alchemist. He's on the caravan to find the 200-year-old alchemist and learn the secrets of the trade. That's what the Englishman is studying in this story. So you can already start to see some pushback against his original dream and what this young boy Santiago is looking for here. So again, his journey is stopped by a tribal war in the area, and the caravan stops at an oasis where Santiago falls in love with an oasis woman, Fatima. While at the oasis, Santiago has a vision of an attack on the oasis and alerts the chieftains, who are able to fend off the attack. The alchemist gets word of Santiago's vision and invites Santiago on a trip into the desert, during which he teaches Santiago about the importance of listening to his heart and pursuing his personal legend. The alchemist convinces Santiago to leave his new love Fatima and pursue his personal legend. So while the alchemist and Santiago continue through the desert, the alchemist shares much of his wisdom about the soul of the world. They're days away from the pyramids when a tribe of Arab soldiers captures them. In exchange for his life and the life of Santiago, the alchemist hands over to the tribe all of Santiago's money that he earned while working at the crystal shop, and tells the soldiers that Santiago is a powerful alchemist who will turn into wind within 3 days. Santiago has no idea how to turn into the wind, and over the next 3 days, he contemplates the desert. On the third day, he communicates with the wind and the sun and coaxes them to help him create a tremendous sandstorm. He prays to the hand that wrote all, and at the height of the storm, he disappears. He reappears on the other side of the camp, and the tribesmen, awed by the power of the storm and Santiago's ability, let him and the alchemist go free. So, to finish up here, The alchemist continues to travel with Santiago as far as a Coptic monastery several hours from the pyramids. There he demonstrates to Santiago his ability to turn lead into gold using the philosopher's stone. He gives Santiago gold and sends him off. Santiago begins digging for the treasure at the foot of the pyramids, but two men find them and beat him. When Santiago speaks to them about his dream vision, they decide he must have no money and let him live. So before leaving, one of the men tries to describe the worthlessness of Santiago's dreams by telling Santiago about his own dream. It talks about a treasure buried in an abandoned church in Spain where a sycamore tree grows. The church is the same one in which Santiago had his original dream, and he finally understands where his real treasure is. So he returns to Spain to find a chest of jewels and gold buried under the tree, and plans to return it to go back to the oasis where he will reunite with Fatima, who awaits him. So that's a short recap of the story, but breaking down some of the things in the story. So to kind of sum it up, one thing led to another. So in the beginning, he was given a flock of sheep where he was eventually robbed of the sheep and landed at the job selling the crystals. So he saved up all the money from the crystals, and then when he was in the desert and robbed with the alchemist gave all of his money that he earned selling crystals to the Arab tribesmen, who then eventually let him go. And then he was able to finally get to the pyramids, and then where he was beaten as well, they took his gold that the alchemist turned into gold from lead, and then was able to pay them, and with that, he was able to find the true value of his treasure, which was where he was all along. So the overall message of the book is to follow your dreams. And what I took from reading it is that in life, you're going to have a lot of these ups and downs all throughout the journey, and one thing is going to lead to another, but you need to have the main goal in mind. So in the book, Santiago could have stopped after he got comfortable, but he kept going to follow the dream he had of the riches. So kind of one thing leading to another, you may be doing one thing now and thinking about how is this going to benefit me? You may not know that answer right now, but you know it will sometime in the future. So that's along the lines of investing. So for me, reading a lot of books, I never knew how I was going to be able to, use a lot of this information, whether it was for investing or whatever, but all that information now led into me being able to talk on a podcast. It's led me to be able to analyze a business. It's getting into real estate, buying my first house. You never really know where that book is going to take you. And then all of a sudden, a couple years down the line, you're going to remember that one book and think, man, if I never read that, where would I be right now? If I never saved that money back then or put it into stocks, where would I be right now? Because during college, I was putting a lot of money into index funds, where I finally said, all right, I'm done trading stocks. I'm going to put this money into index funds and just let it grow. So I had a good chunk in there, and I never knew how I was going to be able to use it, but I knew eventually that I was going to be able, or that I was going to have to use it. I just had no idea on what. So during the flip on my house, I got into a little bit of a financial pickle, and I had to start pulling from that money. So if that money was not there, or if I just kept it in savings, it wouldn't have grown, and it wouldn't have been able to help me down the road. So that's part of that journey that really I get to see come to light, and I really relate to this book as well. So, but back to the story, it's about the journey and not the destination. So he was where his riches were the entire time, and he kept having these dreams, and to follow those dreams. He never would have been to Egypt if he just started digging at the tree. So he needed that journey to realize where his riches really were, and then go back and find the riches. So he wouldn't have learned those lessons, unlike the person who beat him at the foot of the pyramids and told him of his dream. He never would have found the treasure if he didn't go and follow his dreams. Now, that just ended up in a round trip circle of pain and suffering, but what he was able to take from that were the lessons. And that kind of ends on a question here. So what are the lessons you're learning in life right now that may not be so clear, but it's going to have the ultimate payoff at the end of the day? So in my life, I was able to just tell that story about how I was investing and putting that money away. I don't know for what, but I know I'm going to have to use it down the road. I'm reading, and eventually this is going to become relevant, but how? In what way? So right now, being able to do this podcast, be able to put the blogs out, really dive into the financial freedom, personal finance, how to help people, I'm going through that right now. And I know the podcast will help me down the road. So doing the podcast is going to help me with public speaking. I'm going to get a lot more fluid as I keep doing this, find my flow, how to prepare for the podcast as well, how to write blogs a little bit better, and then be able to go and help people do the same thing and travel and do everything. So I appreciate you guys listening, and you can find me on all the socials at the Figuring It Out Finance Podcast, figuringitoutfinance.com. Go take the survey if you're still listening, and let me know your money questions, because I'd love to see them and read them and talk about them on the podcast. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Figuring Out Finance Podcast for the Chapter 6 of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series on Friday. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.